I'm the rest of us. Keeping my perfect score of always clicking the right graphic away at the right time. That's right, I'm 5 for 5 now. There's no question that that title did not click away late or at the inappropriate... I didn't hear any clicking, did you? Hey, everybody. I'm Tom Lommel. I am your host for Disorganized Play. We are playing Tales of the Yawning Portal starting tomorrow night on Saving Throw Show. So, if you are a player for that, well, I'm going to ruin most of the beginning of it if you're going to play from the beginning. Although it is an anthology adventure, so who knows, you may just start with Tomb of Horrors and end there. Welcome, everyone. I'm so glad that you could join me on this... gray California afternoon. I'm okay with that. That's fine. I enjoy a little bit of what we call lovingly the Seattle sunshine. So, what are our topics today? Bump, 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 bump. Let's take a look. So, we are going to talk about hooks and reskinning the adventure. I cannot avoid screwing with an adventure. I almost never run them as is. Let's talk about how we're going to change this one. Shall we? That's on deck for today. I encourage you to change your adventures to make them more personal to your PCs and your players, and perhaps to yourself. Secondly, we're going to talk about some maps. We've got to get some maps together. I don't have all of the maps together, but I got one put together that I like, so I'm going to share that with you all. We're going to talk about the chat rewards for this show. So if you are a longtime fan of Saving Throw Show, and even if you're not, you should be aware that we encourage chat to influence the outcome of the game, to have a stake in what happens. But we have decided to change the way that that's going to play out, so that maybe it's not quite so swingy and intrusive with what's happening in the storyline, and maybe has a little more subtle touch to it. We're going to try it, and if we decide to tweak it, we'll decide to tweak it. But I want to talk through that with all of you in terms of how chat rewards are going to work, because they're going to be a little bit different for everyone, or at least for this show. I've decided to tweak. Of course, I can't just run chat rewards the way they've always been run. I got to tweak it, guys. I got to reskin it. I've got to make it more personal for me and for you. All right, and then finally, we're going to talk, what about the Ironkeep? What's all this Ironkeep garbage stuff, crap, lately garbage, what's going on? So that is, we're going to talk about the Ironkeep. You know, this is called the Ironkeep Chronicles, and I want to share with you kind of some of my plans for how that actually shapes the greater campaign, or how it plays into the greater campaign, because we're not going to hear a lot about it today, which I think is going to be a surprise for the players, but that's okay. So, that's what's on deck. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Flockwad, for moderating, and let's get into the stew, shall we? Let's do that. So, hooks and reskinning. We can't talk about hooks and reskinning without talking a little bit about our character establishment session 0 that we ran last time. I'm not going to recap the recap. I thought it was a great session, but what we do need to come out the other side of that with is, okay, so we did this, you know, proto, very rules light, very failure heavy, high drama kind of session that was wild and woolly and weird, and I really enjoyed it, and I think the players all had a great time. But what's our net result coming out of that? What has been established? Where does that take us? What does that inspire us to create now that we're diving definitely into Dungeons and Dragons? We're going to play D&D for the rest of the game, unless we have some sort of weird one-offs. And that's, you know, just as an aside, I ran a Gamma World campaign where we used the fourth edition Gamma World rules, And it was fun, but it kind of hit this weird place where the party ended up getting captured. And I felt like we were really getting bogged down in the system a little bit. And I wanted to do something that was like a real like system shock, like a complete reset. Like, hey guys, I'm throwing, we've been kind of grinding along in second gear, and I want to shift this game directly into like fifth gear and see what happens, right? I want to hit the turbo boost button a little bit, because shifting from second to fifth isn't a good idea. Anyway, what I did was I created basically sort of like BattleTech type of walking armored mechs that the players had to play whole new characters. They went in as a rescue squad to rescue themselves because their PCs had gotten captured, right? And I used a totally different system for that, and that actually worked genius. Like I just basically built like 3.5 D&D 3.5 D20 type of stats, and that's the system that we used. And I just gave them like crap loads of hit points and damage dice and da-da-da. And we played it really as a skirmish war game. So that was really fun to go from playing our regular campaign, a 4th edition Gamma World campaign, which was weird in and of itself, but had a very distinct set of rules. And then every once in a while, I would just drop the hammer like, hey, we're going to go and play your Mech Warrior characters, and they intersected with the campaign. So that's something that we may do here in the Ironkeep Chronicles, but it's something I want you to take away as a DM tip, that you can find a way to do this as like a palate cleanser or just a change of pace, kind of shake up the action, get players out of the kind of tunnel vision that they sometimes form. Or maybe like in the case of my players, they got captured and I really didn't feel like there was any way for them to free themselves without the GM sort of like doing this big Deus Ex Machina, like, oh, okay, well, all of a sudden these mechs appear and they begin shooting all of the communist space monkeys who have kept you trapped in this experimental test bunker, and you're all rescued and everything's great. Why do I, as the DM, need to do that? I let the players do that. Okay, you're in charge of these mechs. Your objective is to go and get these guys out of this experimental test bunker where a bunch of communist space monkeys are holding them hostage. So that's something to consider. We may come back to playing like a one-off session of Beastlings or whatever it is. But let's talk briefly about the characters and kind of the hooks that came out of it, and where we've landed in terms of our D&D characters, right? So we're going to, in terms of the timeline, we are we're fast forwarding or flashing ahead 8 years later. So the characters, instead of being like 15, 16, they are now, somewhat, they're young adults. They're 23, 24. They're in command. They have some competency, as much as first level D&D characters have competency, and they have a set of skills, and their background is a little more fleshed out, etc., etc., etc. So let's just run it down. Ivalon says the Sunless Citadel has its own story that runs through like 6 different books. That's true. They only included 2 of the thing, but I don't think you can play that arc if you want to. I don't think it's necessary. I think that will be one of the challenges later, is to try to connect Hidden Shrine of Tomoe-chan into the storyline of Forge of Fury and whatnot. Yeah, so they haven't. This book definitely is truly an anthology in that there's no explicit through line that connects all of these adventures. That's going to be left for us to discover. So keep that in mind. But yes, I'm running the game, so you're going to be able to see how I personally make those adjustments. Let's delve into what the nucleus of our party, where we've sort of landed here. So we'll start with the easy one. So we'll start with Amy's character. Tack Sully Pond is still a dwarf. Now, she had a very clear concept that she wanted to play a warlock. I have to say, I'm not... I feel like the warlock is sort of a two-trick pony. It's like Eldritch Blast, Eldritch Blast, Eldritch Blast, and then cast your 2 spells, Eldritch Blast, Eldritch Blast, Eldritch Blast, and you have a handful of weird abilities. And in my opinion, I think she was more enamored of the idea of having this connection to some sort of weird benevolent or malevolent patron who grants powers or has a connection and extracts some sort of demands in return for, really it sounds a lot like playing a cleric when you come right down to it, right? But with a different suite of spells and abilities. Well, so I talked her out of playing a warlock. I said, let's keep the warlock concept. Let's, if you want the idea of there's some sort of otherworldly force which is granting you these abilities, that we can keep that, so keep the flavor of it, but let's reskin something else. So we can reskin a bard, we can reskin some other character class. She has decided to reskin into the mystic unearthed arcana class that is out there. So that's important in that I'm not going to run a straight up Adventurers League game. So I have the opportunity to, like, let's play with these classes and kind of screw around a little bit and take some liberties with what's going on. I mean, we're also going to play a straight up Adventurers League game anyhow, because chat can clearly influence the game, and that's not technically allowed, right? So that's something to keep in mind. So she has landed on the Mystic. I suggested that. I think she's awakened or something like that. And we'll see how that plays out. It'll be interesting. I've looked at the class. I haven't really, like, gone deep into the class. But she's excited about it, and that's what matters to me. I'm not really super concerned about playing something that's not street legal, so to speak. So that's her. What other interesting things came out of the Session 0 for attack? So the main thing is, you know, her parents are toy makers, and she has this connection where the toys are really sort of the key to, or the spell focus to, unlocking her magic or her abilities, right? And there was definitely this dark edge of, like, however it manifests in this very foreboding way. So that we're going to keep. You know, let's hang on to that and let's see where that goes. I will say, on the flip side of this, that I think it's going to be less heavy-handed and onerous and stereotypical if that, as we discussed last week, that benevolent patron, or whoever this patron figure is, this otherworldly patron figure, that if they turn out to be more of a mischievous trickster figure than more of a Lovecraftian whisperer in the darkness type of thing, right? So that's something I'm thinking about. I'd like to sort of bend the game in that direction. I maybe have to talk with her more explicitly about that, because she's really jazzed about that idea of it being kind of this dark and foreboding figure. But two of the other party members are lawful good, and that's gonna, like, I don't feel like their characters are really gonna stand for that. I have the impression that they're going to, they're really gonna, you know, their characters are gonna rebel against the use of that power. So I feel like there's some intra-party conflict coming up as a result of that choice, and if we can just bend it or tweak it slightly, then they will be more accepting of it, and it'll create more party unity rather than creating a split within the party. So that's Amy's character. Secondly, you know, there are no mystic patrons in the straight-up UA as far as I know. Mystics are actually psionic, right? So that's what she's played a psion before, so she's like, what if I only think there's this patron, and it's really just my understanding of, like I use the toys as a focus to allow me to unlock the own powers within my brain. So we may have actually gone away from the whole idea of the all-seeing patron who delivers boons. I'll have to get some clarification from her on that. But yeah, it's possible there's not going to be any patron involved. If there was, you know, I'd want to think about, like, put some prep time into, okay, what's the name of this being? Do they have other, for lack of a better term, thralls or agents out and about in the world? Do they have a goal or an aim that they're trying to accomplish within this campaign world? What types of sacrifices or contributions or lifestyle implications do they enforce upon or demand from their agents, right? So those are some things I really like as a DM. I'd want to spin on. All right, this is a huge opportunity for me to do some shaping of that character and their interaction with the world and how the lens through which they're going to view the rest of the events in the campaign. So, I mean, there's a huge number of available hooks there for me to try and pull or, you know, divert a character down a certain path or toward a certain set of circumstances. And so getting that stuff nailed down, I mean, that's a golden opportunity that you don't want to just dismiss. Oh, yeah, it's some guy, I don't want ever. You know, it doesn't really matter. So think about that possibly, right? All right, so that's Amy's character. Gaurav's character is named Thawne. Thawne's last name, I don't remember. I didn't write it down. I haven't written it down yet. Not familiar enough with the characters to know their full names. But Thawne turned into a full-blown ranger, I believe, using some of the Unearthed Arcana stuff, and he's a ranged fighter. He's a folk hero. He's lawful good. He's sort of stand up and protect the town kind of guy. Although he's more of a guy who stood for his beliefs and then became a hero, as opposed to a guy who defends the village in order to soak up the limelight of becoming the hero. He does actually have a last name, but I'd have to look. So he's playing a ranger. I don't have a, you know, we both, like, I talked to him about his character. He's like, I feel like he's a little undefined right now. I agree, you know, he's a little muddy, but I don't think that's a problem, right? I think that's, like, one of the things that came out of it was he was invested in doing the right thing, and he was protective of the other characters. You know, I'm going to get you out of trouble. I'm going to get you out of here, that sort of thing. So in a lot of ways, he's similar to the Paladin. But that's all right, right? So Grayson Hale is Eric Reichardt's character. He is going to play the human paladin. As it turns out, I gave the players the option to either let me roll their stats using 46, drop the lowest, or pick the standard array. He's the only one who picked the standard array, and he definitively ended up with the worst stats. So that's everyone else had like at least 117 or something like that, or at least a 16, and a much better average. And he went with a standard array, but that's fine. That was the choice on the table, and he took it, and it's going to work out. So I'm not particularly worried about that. So Grayson Hale, he was going to play fighter. He decided not to play fighter. He's going to actually full-on be paladin. He was thinking about playing a fighter who just didn't have the chops to be a paladin. Kind of, he wanted to be, but he was kind of a wannabe paladin. He had like just failed on the brink, like tested out, like not tested out, but couldn't pass the quals, right? But he decided to go full-on paladin, and he is a paladin of Torm, which will be interesting when we talk a little bit about maps and some of the town hooks, right? So that's him. And then finally, Havana hasn't completed her character yet, but she's going to play a bard by all accounts. And even though she has not filled in the picture of who her character is, you know, 8 years later and what she's like, I think that there is an enormous opportunity here posed by the idea that her parents abandoned her. Right? We decided that they weren't dead. We decided that they abandoned her. And I think there are some opportunities for them to pop back up, or their presence to be felt in some way, shape, or form. And I really feel like that's going to pull in her character concept and like really bring it into focus, give her motivation for adventuring, staying with the party. Oh, hey, we can find my parents. You know, it could be a great quest, even if it's a short-lived one, you know, if it's resolved right away or whatever. I'm not super fussy about that, but I do think that there's a great opportunity for that to be a character hook that she will she'll appreciate, right? That she'll be able to like hook into, and just adjusting some windows here. Sorry, guys. That she'll be able to hook into, and that will hook her back into the rest of the party. So I want to really, as I'm prepping, I want to look for opportunities to find a way to thread them in, and then see how she responds to that. You know, this is one of those areas where you might have a great idea as a DM. Oh, I've got this brilliant concept to thread her parents into the storyline, and she's like, oh yeah, I hate them for abandoning me, and the first thing she wants to do is murder them, right? So keep that in mind. Like, that's one of those areas where you set the stage, but do not have a definitive outcome, and especially don't get hooked into, like, oh, this is going to be an ongoing storyline which will carry us through the next 4 adventures, and it turns out that they're, in the end, they're there in the Tomb of Horrors, and they've been imprisoned, like, don't get wedded to like that sort of like far-reaching adventure building, that if the player makes the decision, I hate these assholes who let me go, all of a sudden all of that kind of planning and scaffolding that you've put together gone out the window, right? So let's just see where, you know, let's drop some hints about that possibility and see how she responds and how her character either picks up that thread or drops it. And that'll give us some motivation and some inspiration on how to continue, right? She may want to get revenge on her parents. I want to hunt them down and find those jerks, and I'll make them pay for all the misery I had to live with Grayson's family the whole time. I hate him. He's not my brother. Grayson, can you go? Can you get some milk? I need you to milk the cow. I'm thirsty. So that's something to think about. So those are the hooks that we have coming out of the characters. Half the party's lawful good. I think there's some potential for problems between the paladin and the ranger versus the bard and the mystic, because I think they're going to be more chaotic, neutral, chaotic good. Hopefully not chaotic evil. We shall see, right? It's a juggling act, but it's one of those things that I have my DM radar up about, is we have a couple of characters that tend to be a little more like, let's just do it, guys, everything's going to be fine, and a couple more are like, whoa, we should not traffic in such forces. Keep that in mind. All right. The other piece of this hooks and reskinning that I want to talk to you about, there's really 3 pieces. That was the first one. The second one is Oakhurst, right? So we have information about the village of Oakhurst, where all of this supposedly kicks off. The paladin did lawful good. I'm sorry. That's fine. I'm fine with alignment conflicts as providing interesting role-playing, as long as they do not induce game-ending or game-blocking types of conflict between the players. You especially see that sort of stuff, and it comes out in a very meta kind of way, where it's like, oh, we're interrogating this goblin prisoner that we've captured, and the thief is like, why, Mr. Paladin, why don't you go around the corner and keep watch? And then the rogue does some sort of horrible torture interrogation thing to the guy, and they come back and it's like, oh, why has the goblin got a black eye and he's missing several teeth? I don't know, he fell down. You know, and meanwhile the player has had to sit there and listen to the whole thing, and what that really turns into is let's find a way to make your character dumber than they actually should be. So that's something to consider. It is definitely very traditional. That doesn't mean that it's enjoyable. You can run an old school game and still have new school flourishes. That's definitely my philosophy. So here's what we have for information about Oakhurst. 900 people. It's near. We have some potential places where we could put it near Thunder Tree, right? It has a village hall. It has a general store. It has a shrine. It has a jail. It has a blacksmith, and it has of course, an inn called the Old Boar Inn, where you can grab a drink, have something to eat, and then have a room for the night, rent a room for the night if you so choose. Very, very minimal, very marginal. Now, that's fine if our characters were just from anywhere, and they just happen, for some reason you are traveling to Oakhurst and you arrive in this small village that has a village hall, a general store, a shrine to Pelor, a jail, a blacksmith, and an inn called the Old Boar. Like, it's not inspiring, right? It's fine. It's a fine hook. It's a fine, quick base of operations. It's a thumbnail sketch. I've decided that our characters have grown up in this village, so that gives us the opportunity to really flesh out Oakhurst, get more of an idea of like what's the history, why is it there, who's the guy who runs the town, etc. Like some of that stuff came out in our session 0. We know who the mayor is, right? We know the mayor has a son that the characters despise, that sort of stuff. And I have to say that some of my players were far more excited about doing the world building on this than I was. And so I took that enthusiasm and turned it over to them and said, hey, if you want to create, if you want to do some world building and you want to shape the village that you grew up in, that's fine. Kind of, here's where it is on the map. Here are the basic facts from the book. Feel free to invent or embellish as much as you want to, right? Great. Oftentimes that's difficult for a DM to do. Oh, I have all these ideas, and I got to keep tight control and keep a tight leash. I want my players to be invested in Oakhurst. If the best way to get them invested in Oakhurst is to let them fabricate the lore about the town rather than read my page upon page of description, or even worse, read the 4 paragraphs that I just described to you, that's not going to really, that's the sort of a push type of approach, and having them create it is more of like a let's all get drawn into the storytelling here. And not only that, but it's a trust issue. Like, number one, it takes time off of my hands to a large degree, or to a certain extent, right? But it's also a trust issue. I trust you to invent stuff that's interesting, but then on top of it, you have to trust me that I'm going to take your stuff and rewrite it and tweak it and file off some of the rough edges and put some details in there that maybe you didn't think of, but I'm also going to embellish some of the details that you put in there that I didn't think of. So that was the approach that I took. They cranked out, just a page summary of the history of Oakhurst and what it was. And then I took my little editing monocle, I put my accountant's visor on, and I adapted it and punched it up and got it to a place where I'm happy with it. So let me give you just kind of the high-level overview of what's going on in Oakhurst, which is 200 years ago, Oakhurst was founded as a religious settlement, basically a colony for a group of worshippers of Ilmater, who is the god of endurance and suffering, who wanted to go out into the woods and sort of eschew the soft city lifestyle to which they had been accustomed in Neverwinter, and go out and prove to the world that they could eke a living out on the edge of the Neverwinter wood, and that they deserved the adoration and praise and blessings of Ilmater, the god of endurance and suffering, right? Now, keep in mind that Ilmater is not, in my opinion, an inherently evil god or anything like that. It is really just someone who suffers misfortune, and it's not like Leviatar. Like, Leviatar is more of sadomasochistic stuff, and Ilmater is I must endure hardships in order to prove my faith, right? So it's sort of that hair shirt type of sect of monks who self-flagellate and that sort of thing, who decide that their faith is best displayed through acts of enduring pain. But to me, it's a little softer than that, right? It's a little more like I will commit to hardships because life is inherently hard, and that is what my God, um, that's what my God demands of me. So this place was founded as a commune that centered around worship of Ilmater, and that was basically the um, that was the center of life for everyone in the town. It was like whatever it was, like 300 people went off in the woods and formed their own place and did the hardscrabble work of forming their own village out of basically just a barren knoll on the edge of the woods, right? So keep that in mind. So that's how it started. At some point, the town begins to or the village begins to prosper and flourish, even though it's a lot of hard work. And they attract more followers of Ilmater, etc. But the leader of the sect, Cairn Windlash, Cairn, who's an elven priest of Ilmater, he's not advancing in levels. Ilmater is not granting him more power. And so rather than seeing this as a test of patience and endurance, which it was, he saw this as we are not performing we're not giving adequate sacrifices to Ilmater, and we need to step up the amount of hardship that we inflict upon ourselves. And he's sort of seduced by the idea that really what Ilmater is seeking is mortal sacrifice. So he essentially sort of goes off the deep end into kind of like very evil territory and begins demanding that the followers perform mortal sacrifices. And the hardcore faithful among him do this, but at some point it's not gaining him any more power. And actually Ilmater decides to punish the village for this sort of blasphemy by inflicting a plague on the town, having the crops wither and dry up. And I think there might have been like either a famine or a flood or something like that too, right? So that's a classic, right? So that's something that's old school, that's Old Testament, right? Kind of, the Lord is displeased with you, is going to bestow a horrid series of curses upon you. So as a result of this curse, life gets worse, and everybody realizes, oh, it's not that Ilmater wants us to, it doesn't think we're enduring enough suffering. It's that Ilmater is mad at us for betraying his values and conducting human sacrifice. So they essentially exile Cairn Windlash, the head of the faith. They exile him from the town and send him off into the woods, and some of his hardcore followers go with him, right? And then to start trying to, the famine and the wells dry up and the plague doesn't really abate much, and so some of them turn to Pelor for relief, and they implore Pelor to bestow his blessings upon the town. And they've seen the error of their ways, and please, can you just heal my dying wife, or whatever it is. And Pelor does actually hear their call, and things begin to turn around in the village. So at that point, the religious commune's kind of control in the community has been shaken, and it has been broken. So now the village, if we kind of fast forward to like the past, to more recent times, it's more of an open village that accepts different faiths and religions, has a bunch of different races who live there, etc. There is still kind of an old school line of people who practice the old faith of worshiping Ilmater, but the church that they had built to Ilmater has been converted into the village hall. There's now a shrine to Pelor, which is sort of the main kind of religious feature of the community. Although, if you want to worship Ilmater, you don't need a church, right? So there is kind of that whole, there's the people of the old faith, and then there are people who worship more modern and diverse deities, right? So that's fine. Hero Biscuit, I am a fan of St. Cuthbert myself. So that's where the town is at. couple other things. What's the main thing? I guess the main thing is, in Session 0, the characters actually visited the Ironkeep, and it was 6 hours travel outside of town. You had to go through the woods and up a mountain to get there. And in the history, the players had written like, oh, it's this place of wonder and fascination, and it's filled with magic, and everybody in town wants to know what's there. Da, da, da. And I'm like, let's time out. Let's pump the brakes on this. In my imagining, the Ironkeep is this floating fortress that is literally three guard towers and then a main tower with 4 iron walls and 2 gates in it, and it floats on this chunk of rock 50 feet off of this peak called Granabat's Peak, right? And I feel like that's the easy hook. Is, oh, by the way, you've heard of this place called the Ironkeep, and you should go investigate it, and you will uncover some long-buried secrets there, right? But one of the reasons that I don't like that particular premise or that particular hook is why are the characters the first ones to do this? If the town has been around for 200 years, then somebody would have come out from Neverwinter or whatever. Somebody 200 years ago or 150 years ago would have gone out there and figured out like, oh, okay, here's some stuff, like here's what's happened, etc., etc., etc. Like that place, if it truly was a place of magical fascination and it really had active effects and things like that, and tunnels and mysteries and things like that, it would have been mined out by now. That's my stance on, oh, there's this nearby thing that nobody can explain. So how do we get away from that? In my imagining, let's twist it. How many of you out there in chat live near some sort of important old landmark, or let's put it this way, formerly important, but old landmark? Think of like the World's Fair fairgrounds or something like that you just take for granted, that nobody ever goes and visits, nobody goes and ever investigates or whatever, Like around here, there's a ton of places that are like that yes, people do go to, like, there's an old Nazi compound that was literally built by American, like rich American Nazis, like they were Nazi sympathizers. And it's fallen into disrepair, and people go out there and check it out, but like other than tagging it with graffiti, there's nothing to be found there, right? So it's something like that, right? So I told them, like, listen, compare it to an abandoned mine. You know it's there. You know that at one time it was a hub of activity. At one time it contained something valuable, but now it's just a mine. It probably has raccoons in it. Who cares? Like, people who go out there and check it out either fall down the mine shaft and break their leg and then come gimping back and are like, oh, I made a mistake. Or they go out there, they check it out, there's nothing of interest or value, and they were out there for 3 days and they come back and they're like, that was a waste of time. So to me, that's what the Ironkeep is. Yes, it floats, and you might think to yourself, oh wow, it's this floating fortress. Like, why wouldn't somebody want to use that as like their home base or whatever? It's off in the middle of nowhere, and it's not furnished. It doesn't have any water. It doesn't really have any good structure to it. It doesn't make a great, like, maybe you could use it as a hideout for bandits, but it's not close to anything nearby. It's not, it's a point of interest, but there's not a lot of advantage to, because of how isolated and remote it is. It's not worth the effort to try and make it into anything else other than a place to spend the night when you're crossing over the mountains. And not only that, but it's sort of in the wilds where, like I've posed it, like it used to be home to a clutch of wyverns, you know, and we saw in session 0, there was clearly some figure conducting some sort of ritual there. But, you know, other than, you know, once a year on the first snow of the fall, when everybody in town kind of suffers these vivid nightmares that they claim, like, oh, it's because of the keep. Other than that, like, nobody in town thinks of it as, like, oh, why would you go all the way out there? Like, that's something the teenagers do to, like, dare each other, like, to prove themselves. Like, oh, I dare you to go out to the keep and spend a night there, right? Okay, fine, whatever. So, you know, Ivalon asked the question, why don't you just, why even bring up the Iron Keep if you don't think it's interesting or important or whatever? We're going to get to that. It's called the Ironkeep Chronicles for a reason, right? And really, the main reason is I'm looking for an overarching through line that I can use to tie all of these adventures together, right? Well, the Ironkeep is going to end up being that through line. But I'll just say this now rather than getting into it in a few minutes. Why roll out that plot line right away when I've got plenty of hot hooks coming out of Oakhurst that I can use to get them exploring the Sunless Citadel, right? So I've got, let's just talk about this hooks and reskinning thing. Let's move directly into that, and I'll come back to the Iron Keep. But just keep in mind that the Iron Keep is the framework for my campaign. It is going to be the central through line that keeps that provides coherence for the rest of all of this dungeoneering that we've got to do, which is in no way, shape, or form related to each other than the first 2 modules, right? And of course, Against the Giants is all related to each other, but I consider that its own. I consider that to be its own standalone adventure, one adventure rather than really 3, in my opinion. It's always played that way, so let's not pretend that it's anything else. All right, so hooks and reskinning coming out of this. So just to talk briefly about like what's the main engine of our premise in Sunless Citadel. What's our inciting incident? Which is a couple things. This magical apple gets sold every fall or new moon or whatever it is, right? That's one hook. Some adventurers go missing, and they go missing in, you know, they were headed off in the direction of the Sunless Citadel. So those are the main things. Like, basically, there's a halfling druid who's been corrupted by this vampire tree, and also he's captured some thralls, and maybe there's goblin raids going on or whatever, but there's this magical fruit that everybody thinks is this great thing, and then it turns out it's actually this cursed item, right? So that's something to... those are ostensibly our hooks. We've got an opportunity here to customize this to our party. So we can do that in a couple ways. Number one, if you recall from our session 0, Havana's character, why am I blanking on this name? Why am I blanking on the name of Havana's character? And it's because she hasn't made her character sheet yet. But Havana's character buried the magical focus that Amy was using, the weird, the weird mummer's wagon that Amy was using as a spell focus, which I had an enormous amount of fun with. So much so, hang on, I forgot about this. Guys, don't tell Amy, but guess what? So this is a wooden stagecoach that I'm going to put together, and it was like $8 or $9 on Amazon, and yeah, I'm gonna make it. I'm gonna paint it up, and even better, there's a little I bought off of eBay. I bought a little wind-up chime for $5 or $6 that I'm going to put inside so we can wind it and play it. So now Amy's going to have Amy. So one of the things is we decided that Amy has multiple focuses, like, or foci, whatever you want to say. that she uses the toys. She can use different toys, so she can use a little wooden doll, you know, as a spell focus. She can use a spinning top as a spell focus. She can use like a yo-yo or, you know, whatever, you know, a little Jack in the Box, whatever it is. So she can actually like go through a bunch of spell focuses. But here's my hook. Somebody went out in the woods and found this thing, like either it called to them or whatever it was. They dug this thing up. This can be one of the quest items, or this can make an appearance in the Sunless Citadel. Why are these goblins all kind of like have all this power and da-da-da-da? What do they worship? BSB care, that's some interesting political news. I do not want to talk about the state of our democracy right now, but I appreciate the update. Thank you. So that's the deal, right? So this is going to be like, instead of the apple, we can have this thing make an appearance. And I don't like the idea of the goblins come and sell this thing off, and you know, da 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 da. Like, I don't need that hook. I don't need that, because we've got the rescue mission of these two people go off and they get lost, they get captured. Well, who do we have coming out of Session 0 for that? Gregory, the mayor's son, is the perfect dude to have gone off. Now they have to do a rescue mission for Gregory, right? That's a great hook. So all this stuff, like with the Ironkeep and whatnot, like I've got plenty of hooks that I can pull into and reskin and plug into Sunless Citadel, right? So maybe, you know, maybe the Gulthias tree, maybe this thing is carved out of wood from the Gulthias tree. Think about that. Think about, are Amy's parents somehow complicit in this whole thing? That they're like goofed off, and you know, like they actually have been out to the Sunless Citadel and they've carved off shavings, or maybe they trade with the goblins or the kobolds or whatever it was. I mean, the fruit is an interesting idea. I'm not saying I have to ditch it 100%, but I don't need it. It can be something that they find and try, rather than goblins come to town selling this thing, which, positioned properly, is just fine as a hook. But I feel like it sets off player radar when it's the goblins come and sell you this. Why are we trading with goblins? How did they get it? Why would they sell this thing that is so powerful for just 50 gold? So I feel like there's, let's put it this way, there's stronger hooks that I can derive out of my Session 0. So I think those are cool things. And another thing to consider is perhaps Havana's character's parents are... Oh yeah, was it Avril? Did she name her character Avril? Well, you know, yeah. Anyway, so I like the idea that they gotta rescue Gregory. They're gonna complain about it the entire time. Of course, that's the perfect push me pull me. Ugh, what did Gregory do? I hate that guy. Ugh, what an ass. So I'm looking forward to that being the hook, right? But yeah, so that one of the halflings in the adventure could be Avril's parents, right? That would be a great, like that has a great payoff. Just like 4 or 5 sessions in, we'll get to that piece, and then we'll know, like, does she want to reconcile with them, or she's like, oh, you turned to evil, I hate you, stab, 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 which is much more the Havana Mahoney idiom, let's be honest. So put that in your quote bank. But there's also an opportunity for Havana's parents to, like I said, they decided to go off. They were still followers of the old faith of Ilmater. They decided to go off and find Cairn Windlash and see if they could become acolytes of him or study him or, you know, align themselves with him. So they're essentially kind of like cult members, like, who are like, let's go find Cairn, the guy who was... you know, who demanded human sacrifice. So this could be like a step into like finding him. Maybe Cairn is the guy who in the Forge of Fury has taken over, like, mastermind of the complex or whatever. That's also interesting, right? So the great thing about the Session 0 is I've got hooks that I can spool out left and right if I want to, and I can either pour a bunch of them right now, you know, really stoke the fires, pour it on the coals, or I can feed them out like a little bit, like a few now, and then kind of like hold, like maybe they don't find the mom and the dad, they just find the dad, and the mom is hinted at for the next adventure, etc. Right? So that's something to, that's our hooks and reskinning, is I don't need to have what's explicitly stated in the module in terms of the apple and this particular halfling is the guy or whatever. James V asks, what if instead of parents, an uncle or a cousin that she doesn't know about, you can gauge her attitude towards the parents before bringing them in? I think I'll have a pretty good idea when, let's put it this way. I'm ready to react however her character reacts to them, right? So you can have a character who's gone down the path of evil, who then she sees her daughter and regrets it and has remorse and realizes the terrible turn her life has taken. You can have a character who's turned down the path of evil, who her daughter rebels against her, and then she just turns the screws of cruelty even harder about, yes, I abandoned you on purpose because you were worthless. Your soul would have never been accepted as a sacrifice to Ilmater as a tiny baby, but now it will be accepted that you are a full-grown adult, or whatever, right? So I feel like as an improviser, I can react to whatever way she spins it, with either cruelty or kindness, which are kind of your two major choices, depending upon how she reacts. And to me, that's far more interesting than, like, let's test the water with, like let's not half-step it. Let's give some hints about it and see how she reacts. That'll also give you an idea. Like, you don't have to just drop, like, oh, your mom shows up. It could be something as simple as you find a piece of scarf on the ground, like of a silk handkerchief, and it's embroidered with your mom's initials. Okay, well, now the wheels get turning. Like, was she captured? Is she somehow involved? Da, da, da. And then you can like gauge the reaction off of that when the light kind of goes on there. Be a little more explicit about foreshadowing that the parents are there, rather than just dumping them in. Right? So if you have pieces like big amorphous pieces like this in terms of what I call Schrodinger's clues, right? I don't know whether this figure is going to turn out to be ultimately evil or ultimately someone who's trapped in an evil lifestyle who can be redeemed. I don't have to answer that until the player responds to them and answers, like, gives me some indications of how they want to respond to that, right? So keep that in mind. So, iSkipper, I usually do quick Q&A on Thursdays, but I'm going to knock this one out very quickly. If you, in terms of a go-to scenario for a fast start one-shot session for noobs, that's not a particular game in general. I honestly would give you a particular game, and that game is called Wildlings. It is by John Harper. It's very rules light. It plays very fast. There's a lot of failure involved, so the characters will struggle. There's not a lot of competency, but you can easily hack it so that they maybe are a little more competent if that's what you choose. But for an example of that, go back and watch Session 0 of Ironkeep Chronicles. We did a variation of Wildlings called Beastlings that just involves a little more magic and such. But that makes, to me, that like it's very easy to grasp. The only hard part is like if somebody's a total noob, they don't know what a D8 is, they don't know what a D10 is, like they get confused on the dice, whatever. You can also, toy around with that kind of stuff. But it plays very, very light, very quick go. The other thing that you can do is Fate has the Evil Hat has a set of cards called It's Not My Fault. And these are essentially plot generation ideas, right? And so it gives three things. It'll tell you where you are now, the reason you're there, like what got you into this in the first place, and then how it's about to get worse. So it gives you the whole premise for a starting adventure, and they're all very flavorful, and they have a deck called It's Not My Fault, I'm Fantastic, which is specifically skewed toward fantasy RPGs. And if you want to generate scenario ideas, those are great. Just bam, 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 throw them down. So, but I would encourage you to go back and watch Session 0. I explained the characters and how the system works for about the first hour and a half. We create characters right there at the table, and then about the 1:33 mark, we actually start playing, and we play about 2 hours, something like that. So it's a quick one-shot, and you will understand a lot more about where I'm coming from and where the party is at and what their character concepts are and how the relationship dynamics play out if you watch that session. All right. So I think we've talked adequately about hooks and reskinning. I know we're running a little bit long. Guess what? Good news, everybody. Let me just double check. I could go a little over time, so I'm going to go another half an hour to talk about some of the rest of the stuff that we've got going on. So, and I will point out, thanks for the link there, FQ. One of the great things about the Fate Accelerated deck of It's Not My Fault, you don't have to use the Fate Accelerated rules if you're not inclined. Fate Accelerated rules play Super Rules Light. That's also an easy system to teach. Especially easy because you don't have to roll different dice. You just all roll the same 4 dice, and the results are really easy to read and interpret and things like that. So Fate Accelerated is also a great one-shot. So you can pair those two things, or you can take something like Dungeon World or whatever and come up with a scenario using the It's Not My Fault deck and just apply it. So it's just a great brainstorming tool. All right, so let's take a look. There's a few different maps that we're going to need for tomorrow's session. Let's pop one up here. So this is the overland map of Oakhurst and the surrounding realms. Here's the great thing about setting Oakhurst into the world somewhere near Thunder Tree is you have all of the stuff in the D&D starter set to fall back on in terms of like what's going on in this area. I wonder what Thunder Tree is going to be like. Well, Thunder Tree's in the book. Now it's inhabited by a green dragon, spoiler alert, but you can take that spin off of it, like maybe it's a different timeline, maybe, you know, you're 50 years later, maybe those events take place at different whatever, right? Maybe they didn't take place, maybe the green dragon left or was never there in the first place, whatever you want to do. Fine, right? But if you're looking for lore, you know, Neverwinter has a pretty decent write-up in the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide. You have maps in the D&D starter set. I happened to trace Mike Schle's map and then do some of my own, and not really embellishments, but kind of like skinny it down a little bit, right? So this stuff is available to you. So this is the overland map. I had to put the Ironkeep, which is on near Granabet's Peak. I put that actually further up than I wanted it to because I was looking at the scale and I was like, well, it really only taken 3 hours to get through the woods to get there. That's twice as much time as I like. So I put it a little bit further up in the middle of the hills. That's fine. It's even further out. Good. So I've got an overland map for them. Ideally, what I would love to do is something that I've done before. Let me show you this too. Which is take a piece of, this is artist canvas that you can get at any art supply shop. It's, you know, you buy this stuff by the yard. I'm sure you can get it at, I don't know if you can get it at Michael's. Usually they have pre-stretched canvas there. That will not work as well. I don't know that I would use it. I guess it's not a bad idea. You could cut it off the frame if you really chose to do that. You might be able to get this at a Joanne Fabrics or something like that too. But honestly, just using a bunch of Sharpie markers and not caring that they're probably going to get destroyed in the process, I created this for a different Session 0 starter session that I wanted to do. And this makes just a fantastic, like, very physical prop that you can hand out to the players. You can, if you so choose, roll up, hand it to them, and, you find this. They open it up. Oh, look at this. Oh, where's Hegemir's Folly? What's that? Oh, the Silver Quill Forest. That's the domain of elves. Oh, Staun's Rest. Let's go there. So I'm really a fan of, like, this is a handmade prop that did not require a ton of skill to make. I bought the canvas, I cut it apart, and then I took a Sharpie and literally drew a map on it. And you have to draw, like, guys, the hills are literally triangles, okay? There's not a lot to it. The trees were probably the hardest thing for me to create. But that's it. It's, in my opinion, like, it's a really cool prop. It didn't take a ton of time to make. It was a time investment. I don't know if I'll make one of these right away for Ironkeep Chronicles. But I want to do this. Like, I'd like to take this thing. I'd like to take this thing and make one of these for it, right? Shadzar says you really need to spill tea on it to give it that, I assume, to give it that weathered look. Yeah, that aged look. Here's the thing, because this is Sharpie, if you hit this with any kind of water or whatever, all of this crap is going to bleed. You're going to lose. Like, that's a great idea. I agree. Like, I've heard that sort of tip before. Do that first. So drizzle tea on it and get, like, weird stains and whatnot. And then put it in the sun and let it dry. Bake it out. Let it completely dry so that those stains are baked in, and then go in and draw your stuff over the top. Because if you do that process backwards, you will regret it. Oh, no! As soon as you hit it, like, the lines are going to bleed, and you're going to be like, oh, shoot. So, yeah, I mean, you could burn it and weather it and things like that. I don't like to do stuff like that because I find that when you burn the edges of a piece of paper or whatever, that stuff flakes off, it crumbles off, there's ash everywhere, it gets on your hands, it gets in your game books and all that kind of garbage. Like, I love that authenticity, don't get me wrong, but in terms of, like, a practical recurring prop that I'm going to use a lot, if I was going to do that, I would seal it in a Ziploc bag or whatever before I put it in near any of my game stuff. And then you get it at the table and it's going to start crumbling and things like that. So I hear what you're saying, and I do think there are times where that idea can be really fun. I don't think for an ongoing thing, I would be very careful about, especially like burning stuff, because that ash gets really grubby and messy. So think about that. Sharpie is permanent. It should stay. Ah, ha, ha, ha. All right. One map that I need that I don't have. I need a map of the Ironkeep. I want to do an isometric one. Maybe I'll do it on gaming paper. They're not there yet, so I'm not super concerned about it. But I need to create some... I need to create the dimensions and the lore and whatnot about the Ironkeep. I need to work on that further. Not super important for session 1. Like I said earlier, they might go there, but that's not our point of investigation. That's not where the story is. So, General Fancy Pants, welcome to the stream. Lucky for you, I'm going to talk for another 25 minutes or so. Assuming my supply of Diet Mountain Dew holds out. All right. One more map that I want to talk about, and then we're out of this topic. I encourage you to go to dmsguild.com and purchase the original adventure. Because, in my opinion, beautiful though this illustration is, it is tiny. Way too tiny. So that's a problem for me. That's a big problem for me. Like, I could take a picture of it and then, like a very easy tip that I've shared before is take a picture with your phone, send it to your computer, print it off, or just send it to your printer, however you do you. And then you're good, right? So you can print off whatever copies you need at whatever kind of scale you want. Instead, I purchased the original adventure, and then I printed off, I cut and pasted the map out of the PDF, and then I printed it off at whatever scale that I want. I always rely on this sort of thing to go in with my little red pen and just mark up this. Here's where this is. Here's where this is. Here's where this is. There's, so I know when they go into room 21, there's 3 goblins in room 22. There's 3 goblins in room 23. There's a ogre in room 16. Like whatever it happens to be, right? Now, when I was out of town last month, I sat on the plane with my I've got one of those little drawing templates, right, that has a bunch of squares and circles and stuff like that on it. James, you love math a little too much. So I redrew the entire map in a very rough fashion, right? This is not accurate to scale. The parts don't all exactly fit together. That's fine. But then I labeled where everything is. All right, so here's the Goblin Chief and the 3 Hobgoblins and the Shaman. Here's where the Dragon Wormling is. Here's the Pit Trap. All of this stuff. This is really going to be a useful resource for me to just kind of like quick look through. Oh yeah, and then what's in here? Oh, 13. Those rooms are all empty. Okay, all right. And then they go in here. There's a rat, and then there's this trap next to it. Right? So I like to have like a high-level overview of the dungeon that I can write on, that I can keep track of who's where. I want a visual one-shot reference of, okay, how do I understand where things are and how they all fit together and how they respond, especially in a dungeon like this where there's a lot of potential, like let's negotiate with these, with the kobolds and then mount an attack on the goblins. Well, the party's going to go, oh yeah, you've been having problems with these goblins, huh? Well, where are they and what sort of reinforcements do they have? Da, 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 da. And if I look at this map in the book, I don't have a good idea of where they are and where their reinforcements are and what their choke points are. But if I look at this thing, I can go, oh yeah, all right. Oh, so in this area, there's a caltrops, and then there's 2 goblins up top, and there's 3 goblins in the room next door, and then those guys could probably fire arrows and ring an alarm. So an alarm would sound here, but then these 3 rooms are empty, and they're not going to want to go past the dragon worm, right? So I can start formulating what a reasonable response is, or at least have a quick interpretation of, like, oh, let me just, I will thumbnail sketch it for you. And be able to do that without having to flip through the book, without having to flip through the map, and figure out what room contains what things, etc. So that's the third map that I've done the small level version. It wouldn't hurt to gussy this up a little bit and just rewrite some of the stuff directly on it. It didn't turn out quite as black and white as I wanted it to, but guess what? I can fix that. So that's something to do. I might take the old tracing paper trick and just bam, 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 like sketch it all out. Those are our maps. All right, guys. So there's 2 things left that I really want to talk to you about. Obviously the other thing I have to do for prepping is like make sure that I got the premise nailed down, the idea of how I want the adventure to start and what. I have a pretty good handle on that. This is definitely like the rescue mission type of thing, right? That's important. So I feel like the premise is pretty good. I do need to do a little bit of reading and make sure I know, okay, well, these are what the first, like if they go 4 rooms deep in any particular direction, that's pretty good. Let's at least start there and then have an idea of what the next 4 rooms might be, and that's probably going to take us to the end of the night, right? Like 8 rooms, maybe they can chew through 12, but I don't have to read the whole thing. I just have to know some stuff. The other thing that I want to do is I have this hook where this ritual took place. You'll notice that it was like a draconic type figure, and the kobolds that they encountered were carving eggs, and there was a rune that was being traced in the air, and there was snow and stuff like that. Well, to me, it's like they were trying to magically fertilize a dragon egg, and the wormling that's in the Sunless Citadel may be the fruit of that ritual. Okay. So I have a hook there, too, for why is the wormling there, and how does it relate to the whole thing? The light may go on, it may not. I don't know how explicit I need to make that. But let's get our premise nailed down, and then let's look at how, where some of the reskinning that we're talking about doing with the possibility of replacing the halfling with one of the parents, or replacing the apple with a toy, and things like that, how that might have implications for earlier stages of the module. If the kobolds are all scared of toys, why are they scared of toys? That's an interesting hook, right? It's very personal with specifically one of the characters. Or maybe the goblins are like, oh, have you come to negotiate too? Oh, wait a minute. What do you mean too? Oh, dwarves come from Oakhurst and they trade with us. They do? Yes, every year. What do they trade for? Oh, they want pieces of the tree. Creepy! Awesome. That would be a great scene, right? That's a great role-playing opportunity. All right, so those are some things just that I didn't even put on the agenda, but that should be taken as stated, right? If you're going to prep your session 1, you should have a handle on the premise. You should have a handle on the first 8 rooms that they're potentially going to go through. And you should have a handle for how some of the deep game may play out. So, there's that. Let me just double check that I'm not. Okay. Interesting stuff. Yes, it's very treepy. Oh, Quincy, you're my hero for today. Very treepy. So, yeah, I agree with BSB Care's assessment that I need to work very hard on keeping the party from murdering the kobolds right away. They don't have a lot of reasons not to. So I think Meepo needs to make an appearance probably pretty early on and make a plea for like, oh, don't hurt us, etc. They need to be presented. If there's truly going to be a role-playing opportunity there, they need to be presented as non-threatening right away. I don't know. It could be tough too with 2 paladins who are like, kobolds are evil, let's just put them to the sword. That's fine. There's different ways to get the story out if they choose to go that route. That's their choice. All right. I've got a very so I just want to chat with you folks about the way that the chat rewards are going to work for the stream. So, like I said, for those of you who are not familiar with Save and Throw Show, we allow you, one of the ways that we are able to rent the studio space that we rent and to have the different microphones and equipment and computers that we have at our disposal is we accept donations from you fine folks at home. You can either back us on the Patreon, you can contribute directly to us, you could sub up as a Twitch subscriber, all that sort of stuff, right? So, which is awesome. So, each game has a different set of chat rewards, and one of the things I've had to do in order to launch this particular game on Wednesday nights is decide how chat was going to interact with the events at the table. And we've had a variety of different approaches over our shows. I will say for good, for bad. There's sometimes it really takes a story in a vastly different direction, and that's great. And sometimes it really takes a story in a vastly different direction, and everybody kind of sits around like, I'm not sure what's going to happen next, but let's see. So that's something to consider. So when I sat down with Dom to build these chat rewards, I wanted to make sure that you guys could contribute something meaningful to the game, but not necessarily have kind of a war of like escalating chat rewards where it's like, I'm going to add 3 more bad guys to this fight. Oh no, they're in too much trouble. I'm going to add an NPC to this fight to fight the bad guys. Well, I'm going to add more bad guys, where chat really kind of, it becomes an escalating war of who can like throw more influence onto the board and kind of wrest control away from events at the table, right? So, I love the fact that we are an interactive channel and that you guys actively participate in what we're doing. But on the other hand, I wanted to also like keep the story in bounds and whatnot. Enough disclaimer, enough hemming and hawing. Let's talk about what you can actually do. And let me see if I remember. That's not it. All right. Yeah. So, well, D20 robot just BSB care. Yeah, BSB care popped this up. So where? Let me open this screen here. Ironkeep Chronicles. Very good. So this comes up right away. All right. So the main currency in the game is going to be a thing called a bump up. All right. So you're going to be able to purchase bumps for the table, and what these are, they're one-time bonuses that grant somebody a +1 on any type of die roll. Okay, so it could be +1 to attack, a skill check, a saving throw, or it could be a +1 on your damage rolls, right? So you can use them as a player, you can use them however you like, which is pretty nice, right? So that's fun. There's no individual contributions for that. It's $10 for everybody at the table. Everybody gets one except for the DM, because I'm the DM and I have more chaos. I get 3, okay? You cannot spend more than 3 bumps on a given roll, okay? So that's something to think about, right? Is you're going to get a +3, but you can't like load it up and get a +10 and essentially guarantee success on a particular roll. So you can influence the outcome of the die roll, but you can't lock it in. But you can also juice the damage on a die roll. Like I think that's actually very useful. Is you're going to fire an arrow and I'm going to spend 3 bumps to do an additional 3 points of damage. Great. Like I'm okay with that. The +3 cap really makes it influential without making it game breaking. Okay, so that is an issue, or that is one. That is one thing that you guys can do. All right. We're also going to have a series of, so James V, just to your advantage disadvantage thing is incorporated, but in a slightly different way. Okay. So there's another thing called Guide to the Hand of Fate. So within the realm of the campaign, there are 9 Lords of the Ironkeep. Okay, I'm giving you a little insight into some of the world building that's happening in my mind behind the scenes. There's 9 Lords of the Ironkeep. These 9 Lords correlate to the 9 beasts that we saw in Wildlings. Did I do? I didn't do a screenshot of that character sheet. But essentially, those 9 Lords are going to have kind of purview over different buckets of skills. So hunting and tracking is 1, right? Charming and deceiving, affixing a price is another. Seeing the unseen, tapping the weave, calling into shadow is another, etc., right? So each game there will be 3 of these Lords who are in phase, as it were. One of them will be Ascendant. Any roll that you make that is related to that Lord's portfolio, you will get an additional 1d3. So we're going to roll a die 3 bonus to that roll. Whatever Lord is dominant, you get advantage on those rolls for that time. And then whatever Lord is retiring, is essentially diminishing, they grant a 1d3 penalty to those rolls. So it all sort of balances out. But you have one Lord who's on their way, kind of coming up. One Lord that is overseeing the game and granting advantage on everything, and then one Lord who is receding from the game, whose influence is the weakest, essentially, right? So if you don't like the portfolio of Lords that has been determined or drawn at random for that particular game, you can make a $25 donation, and 3 new Lords will be appointed or drawn at random. That's a good question. Is it will be 3 completely new, or will we shuffle the whole deck and pull 3 different ones at random? I haven't completely decided about that. But that's another way that you can donate and influence the bonuses and penalties that will be applied to the PCs during the course of the game. You can only do this once per hour, so you can't just keep spamming it and re-rolling, essentially rearranging the lords. Like, they have to at least hold sway for an hour, right? But we play about 3 hours. You can do that 3 times a game if you don't like what's come up. Everything else, we're going to do tiered donations. So as people in chat contribute, the donation level scales up and different abilities get activated. Okay, so let's just talk through those briefly. Short rests are not going to be tied to whether or not the party actually takes a short rest. They can rest for an hour in the dungeon, and I don't care. Short rests are going to be tied to the tiered chat donation. So at $25, they gain the ability, if they want to take a short rest, they can use that as a short rest recharge. And I'm kind of inclined to think you don't, or at least rule, you don't have to use the actual time to get that short rest back. You can't do it in combat, but you can essentially second wind it like 10 minutes. Boom, all right, we're short rested back up. I've recovered my short rest abilities. I've spent some hit dice for healing, etc. All right, that's the main way that you influence healing. Secondly, I am going to add a, I can't help but screw with stuff, right? So, BSB Care, just to answer your question, I'd love to build a wheel for the 9 lords so that we'd spin the wheel and they'd fall into place together. It'd be a fixed order. I don't know which is going to be better. Like, having that, I won't be able to have that physical prop. I'd love to have that physical prop, but I'm not going to have it. So I may just make a set of Lord's cards and deal them out, kind of, these are the 3. And that way, you get some different combinations that you might not necessarily get. I'm really undecided on whether the Lords should be a progression, so that, like, Magic would be on one side and the Minotaur would be on the other, or if it's more interesting to have one ascending, one descending, just have them mixed up, totally random. I don't know. I mean, I'm looking to see how that plays out. I'm also looking for input from you guys in terms of what you think would be more interesting. The advantage to having them be cards that are drawn at random is we could set aside the 3 current lords and redeal a whole new hand out of 3 that aren't in there. Or we could shuffle them and have them, they might come back, but they might come back mixed. So I like, the easiest thing for me to do is cards. It has the most flexibility, and also I don't have to find a wheel and spin it and all that kind of garbage. But I agree with BSB Care that the rotating the thing makes it feel like a constellation of influence that cycles through. So I like that idea too. Haven't made up my mind 100% on how that's going to work. Originally, I envisioned it as a wheel, and this reward was actually called Turn the Wheel, but that was a little too burning wheel for my taste. But originally it was kind of called that, where it would rotate around. So we could have a wheel that is on paper, and then have numbers attached to how that wheel, we'd roll dice to see how it rotates. Avalon, you're right. It's largely a map of the 5e starter set, but I added Granabat's Peak and I added Oakhurst, and I took off several other things that were not important to me. So I took off, Fandalin's Mine or Fandelver's Mine or whatever it is, and I took off the well and a few other points of interest that were not relevant to the game. So yes, but no. Did I have to do this map? I didn't have to do this map. Did I have fun doing it? Yeah, that's why it's here. I wanted something hand-drawn. There's a version of this where I've just photoshopped it. Also, I can share this with you because it's although somewhat derivative, it is an original work that I did based on the original map, right? So, King Cupcake, welcome aboard. We're talking through our chat rewards for tomorrow night. So, if you look in the chat rewards, the other thing that you will see is that I'm going to introduce a critical hit and a critical fumble deck. So, as the donations scale up, we will activate critical hits. Those, I mean, super crits, let's put it that way. So, in addition to doing the extra damage, I'm going to have a deck of cards that they can draw from and do bonus effects to. I am very much considering having a customized deck for each PC so that the crits that come out of the super crits that they have the potential to draw from are customized to their specific character. And that way I don't have to go, oh, you bludgeon your foe in the rib cage and they are short of breath and they're at disadvantage on all checks next turn. And Garav goes, I didn't bludgeon the guy. Oh, I shot him with an arrow. Okay, well, let's ignore that. You pierce, I can just come up with a custom deck for each of the characters. I think that will be interesting. It's a lot more work, but I think that will be interesting. The other thing that and likewise, we're going to have a critical fumble deck, and I think those would be fun to customize to each character. Especially because Amy's got all these weird magic powers that could really go anywhere, right? And so you could have some really interesting customized cards just for her. So we get to another tier of donations, and we get the critical fumble deck gets activated, right? Now all of this is just adding like some extra juice to the game that I don't think is going to be game breaking, which definitely has an influence on the outcome of the game, but does not dramatically like change the storyline of like, why does this guy show up or whatever, right? So that's fun. Yeah, I could do a table. You could do like you could do a set of 9 cards that says who's adjacent to each lord in terms of ascendant and diminishing 2. That's also not a bad way to do it. Just shuffle them up and pull one. Yeah, those are some great ideas, you guys. Thank you for chipping in. So, and a table is a great idea too. All right, so we've got the possibility for a critical hit deck that will add some extra bonus when they roll a natural 20. We've got a possibility for a critical fumble deck when they roll a natural 1. Now that is something extra that's laid on top of the game, but I think that is fun and interesting. Here's the part where you get to contribute. If you are a backer at the $25 level each month and above, you will get to contribute your own set of cards to either the critical hit deck or the critical fumble deck. So you will write a card for each PC that will be, a potential critical hit effect for them. I obviously reserve the right to adjudicate, like, well, if it does extra damage, it does this, or if it has a specific effect, it does a specific effect, etc., etc., etc. Right? Like, I get to have the final say on what happens at the end. No big deal. That's certainly understandable. But you get to put, write a custom card for Tack, write a custom card for Grayson, write a custom card for Avril, write a custom card for Thawne. And each of them is going to have their own special, there's sort of like, Thawne is a guy with a bow, so we have a pretty good idea of like the stuff that we could potentially write for him. But so you get to create material that we're then going to use at the table. And whether that's you want to create 4 critical fumble cards or you want to create 4 critical hit cards, send your ideas in and we will incorporate them into the game. So you can't make a whole deck, like it's going to be like one round for each Patreon backer per month if you're so inclined. Like I don't want one person to flood the deck with 40 cards that then I have to adjudicate all of them, etc., etc., etc. So let's get some, I'm gonna put some boundaries around it, obviously, because I'm the DM. But I want to hear your ideas and what you have to contribute. And I think that is just a fun way to like help put a little extra flair on the game and on their individual characters, right? All right. The same thing with the short rest we're doing with the long rest. So long rests will not be available to the party within a session unless that donation tier is activated, and then they can take a long rest if they need to. So it's not that... yeah, as BSB Care points out, in theory, you could have more cards in one deck than the other. I will probably try and keep them balanced so that it's roughly the same number, because I also want to have like a good like 6 to 8 cards. And this is one of the things that I really need to prep, is like if I need to write 6 cards for each of them, I need to get this together so that they're, you know, when they crit, there's a variety of effects rather than which one of the 3 am I going to get this time. But yeah, you could have a variety of effects for based on which character it is. I'd like to keep it balanced so that everybody feels like they have an equal number of opportunities to get a weird number of effects. I just want to state for the record, I'm not using an off-the-shelf critical hit or critical fumble deck. I'm not using a Kickstarter-based critical hit or critical fumble deck. These are going to be custom for the game, for these characters, things that I've made up. Now, some of the effects, of course, is going to be overlap and inspired by different gaming resources out there. But I want this to have a very specific feel that this is that character. This is that character's thing, right? This is something stylish that's embellished onto that character. So I don't think I'm gonna have a critical success card that says your dice are maxed on your damage roll. I think I will probably do like some bonus dice or something like that. I could also do something like Stolen from Monday Night Dungeon Fight, where it would say reroll 1s and 2s, something like that, or 6s explode or something like that. And that's tricky because not everybody does like a d6 worth of damage in D&D. But it could be something like your top pips explode or something like that. So I could, and if you want to send it in, like send it in. I'll adjudicate it. I guess I would encourage you to focus on like, let's give that crit like a specific name, like a specific maneuver or move, and let's give that crit just a little bit of flavor text description, enough that it would apply, you know, generally, but to this, to an attack, to this specific type of attack, and then we'll work out the details of like, well, I'd like this to be a max damage. You know, max damage isn't so bad depending upon what the attack is, right? If it's the ranger character, then max, you could say max weapon damage. That's not terrible. I'm okay with that. It's not like Monday Night Dungeon Fight where you're rolling 10 die 6 or 9 die 6 or 6 die 6 or whatever, right? So so think about that. It would not. So BSB Care says like Firestarter, all attacks damage for her next spell is fire damage. Her hair floats around, a la Drew Barrymore's Firestarter. Keep in mind that these things are going to be drawn when they crit. So this card would actually read, all of your damage is converted to fire damage, and you float around a la Drew Barrymore and Firestarter for the remainder, until the start of your next turn. So it applies, when you roll a crit, it applies. Like, bring that card out. Like, let's do a draw from the deck and figure out, like, okay, what happens when you crit on this attack? It's not going to be, I mean, you could have some effects that would be like, your next spell attack does this or whatever, but I'd prefer it to mostly be centered on an effect that is triggered with the crit, like as a part of the super crit. I would prefer not to have things that's like, oh, for the next 5 rounds, you're surrounded by an aura of flame shield and that, and like, I don't want it to be a bunch of record keeping and bookkeeping of like, oh, I forgot that now when does my flame shield go out? Like, what round has it been? Like, I don't want it to become that much bookkeeping. Okay, keep that in mind. So chat's gonna activate short and long rests. Chat is going to enable crits and enable super fumbles. Well, they're just going to be fumbles, right? They're not necessarily super fumbles. I guess they're called that. And then there's two last things that we're going to talk about. Chat will be able to activate one cool thing. Each character in the party has one cool thing that I've asked the players to come up with for each of their PCs. And that one cool thing is an ability that they have, which is not in the books anywhere, which is something that is generally considered to be kind of like a very short-term, like either an instantaneous kind of like juice boost, or maybe something that lasts about a minute. That's like, well, for 1 minute, my speed is doubled and I can spider climb. Okay, that's powerful, but it's not game-breaking. But it's a cool thing that happens, and it's outside the realm of like, oh, you get spider climb for a minute. No, it's actually cooler than that. Like, I get to kind of parkour for a minute or whatever it is, right? So that's, you know, James V, this is a good example of Garav. You know, Garav's character could hit somebody in the knee and its movement is reduced by half. Sure, that's something that seems like a reasonable super crit effect to get back to that sort of thing. Yeah, that could definitely work. It could be something like they're at disadvantage until the start of the next round. Or, you know, I don't want it to be a ton of, like I said, persistent effects. But if you looked at any of the stuff that happened, like in Monday Night Dungeon Fight with the traps and things like that, or especially out of the traps and the deck of Wheel and Woe, those are the sorts of things that you could foresee, like applying on a super crit, right? I haven't really thought about story tiers for the top 1 or 2 tier. I would like to hear more about what you think that would entail. All right. But at any rate, so the characters would each have one cool thing that they can do, and that ability is above and beyond their class abilities. It's not part of the character or whatever, but it would apply, you know, it would be activated when we hit a certain level of donation in the chat, and they would have that available to them to use as they see fit. You know, so another example of something that I would come up with would be, okay, I grow 2 feet taller and my strength goes up by 4 for the next 3 rounds. That would be a cool, you know, one cool thing. That's something supposed to be kind of like unique to your character. Why you can do that, who knows? We can explain that in game terms, like find a way to get to the root of what's going on with that. But that's the premise behind it, is that there's going to be something above and beyond that is game changing but not game breaking. That chat, when we hit that donation, you can activate that for everybody at the table. And then finally, the last thing will be commission the battle map. So I've got enough work on my hands here with prepping the game and doing the streams and whatnot. But if you guys hit the top tier of donations during the stream, then that next stream I will take time out of my life and draw the battle map on gaming paper, you know, with a decent amount of detail so that we can play on the grid, like roll it out and play, rather than either having to draw it on dungeon tiles or just theater of the mind it. So that's where I'm at with the top tier right now. Just to give people some incentive to contribute, and also that time and energy, not that I'm getting paid for doing it, but I want the stream to at least be recognized, like, for the effort that's getting put in, rather than kind of like giving the milk away for free, right? So that's something to think about. So yeah, BSBK, if you have more ideas, and if you guys have you know, input on this or other rewards that you would like us to consider, we are certainly open to, you know, doing some fine-tuning or adding some additional things or whatever the case may be. But this is what, you know, this is sort of our starting bevy of stream rewards. I want to see how it plays out. I want to see how it affects the flow of the game, how the players respond to it, how chat responds to it. And if there are things that we need to tweak and fine-tune or add or take away, that's fine. But like, let's see how the game goes and get into it. This is our initial starting place. All right, so final topic. Obviously, we're going over a little bit here, but like I said, I don't have to be anywhere immediately today, so you're all in good luck in terms of how much blathering I get to do at you. So maybe back a little bit more specific on topic to the D&D game. What about the Ironkeep? So it's called Ironkeep Chronicles. We're playing through the Yawning Portal. We have not really talked much about the Ironkeep. Obviously, there are some things that we've discussed, but as I have positioned it, the Ironkeep is this remote, abandoned location that the locals in Oakhurst call Delver's Folly, because you can't imagine the number of times that some hardy group of adventurers has geared up and stopped in Oakhurst on their way to the Ironkeep, the legendary floating Ironkeep, and then come back a week later, you know, with some frostbite and nothing else to show for it, right? So why is that the situation? The premise that I am operating under is that the Ironkeep is eventually going to become sort of this base of operations for the players. And as it is now, it's 3 towers and a main tower and 4 sets of walls and 2 gates. But rather than have the players go directly to the Ironkeep and try to shoehorn in a bunch of adventure hooks, and how does this relate to the Sunless Citadel, and how is it going to relate to the Forge of Fury and all that sort of stuff, I want them to gradually explore and adopt the keep, right? I don't want this to be a game that starts in the Ironkeep and ends in the Ironkeep. I want it to breathe a little bit, and I want them to have a reason to embrace and adopt it rather than have it be so on the nose and just dumped on them like, oh yeah, and then we found this cool floating fortress which we took over and it was awesome. That's one way to start. That's not how I want to start this. I want to get them dungeoneering, give them some reasons to explore, give them some hooks to work off of that are based in the background and the session 0 that we've established, and then use that first adventure to then transition to the Ironkeep. Now, what I think is somewhere along the line they're going to find a magical key that maybe has a symbol or a rune etched on it which matches a rune that they remember seeing in the Ironkeep, and they may take it up there. And then what we're going to discover is that the Ironkeep, those 3 guard towers and that 1 main tower, are just the I don't remember if it's called the Bailey or whatever it is, but it's just the front door. And when you have the key, you can unlock the extra dimensional fortification, or you can summon from wherever it is, like sync it back up into phase, the larger pieces of the structure. And so now I've got this keep that has endless possibility. That, you know, like I said, there were 9 previous lords who hold sway over the game. These are owners of the keep who have either been slain, or maybe they still live there, or they're ghosts or spirits or whatever. But we have those that now we have this opportunity for history that can expand with the characters as it needs to, rather than a huge fortress that needs to be completely explored before the characters can move on with the other adventures that are in the book, right? So yeah, it's really just kind of the front, and I want them to be able to discover these abandoned areas, you know, discover wings of the keep proper that they can then renovate or explore or put to new use, or completely reappropriate. And I think there are areas in the keep where maybe this wing was out of phase, but when you bring it back, it turns out that there were still inhabitants who were inside. I think we talked about this last time too. So, you know, they can discover, oh, there was this whole community of clockwork servants who were locked up behind this one area, and now we have all these like little robot guys who are at our beck and call. And so the premise that I'm working with here is that once they find the first key, each of these owners has had some type of focus or master kind of control item, if you will, access piece that they used in order to bring their portion of the keep into phase, that established their ownership over that section of the keep. And so if they go around to the different dungeons in the world where these things were lost, they can recover that key and open up a whole new area of the Ironkeep. Now when they do that, maybe it goes back to this whole Tarrasque idea that we talked about, where there are forces that come to try and steal something within the Ironkeep, and they have to defend the keep from whoever's coming, or whatever, whatever minions or lieutenants or forces are sent after. I mean, if you think about it, like a great one would be a Githyanki's silver sword is embedded in the stone someplace, or it's in a treasure vault, and so the Githyanki keeps sending, once that like materializes, sinks into phase with the material plane, the Githyanki starts sending different forces to go and try and retrieve that sword. Maybe it just starts off with like a single Githyanki guy, or maybe it starts off with some minion mook guys or whatever. But now we can have a campaign that operates on two levels. There's this home base that they can appropriate, and I'm thinking like one adventure might be, let's move the Ironkeep closer to Oakhurst. Like, let's somehow torque the magic item that allows it to levitate, and then hitch up a bunch of horses, and James V can do the math on how many horses it would take. Assuming that it levitates 50 feet above the ground, the walls are all 2-inch thick steel. They're approximately 20 feet tall, and then figure each guard tower is it's about 40 feet tall, 30 to 40 feet tall each. So let me know how many horses you're going to need to tow this thing back to, and of course the number of hours, and if you were to defend yourself from 3 flights of wyvern attacks that might take place during the course of this thing too, how many guards you would want to hire. So that's my homework assignment for you, Mr. James V. But that's where I'm planning to go with the Ironkeep. It's a big idea. It is not one that I want to immediately flesh out. We're throwing enough stuff at the players to begin with. Let's let them take Oakhurst, take the hooks that we're incorporating into the Sunless Citadel, and see where they go before we get too deep into exploring this mystery of the Ironkeep. Now, I will say, I think the Ironkeep, like, does play into part of the premise, where it's like, well, Gregory and his compatriot went off on some mission to Granabat's Peak. I know they're planning to use the Ironkeep as a base of operations, but we don't know what happened to them from there. And when they get there, they'll find, oh, okay, well, there was a camp clearly made, but it's been packed up and it's been abandoned for 4 or 5 days or whatever. So, what if the keep was being towed by a set of pigeons? That's the most Monty Python joke I'm going to make. I will not make any more references, but I'm going to let you enjoy that. So, those are my thoughts. Those are my plans. That's my prep. That's where I am at. If you have input, I would love to hear it. You can hit me up on Twitter. Oh, I didn't incorporate my little... I don't have my little calling card down below, you guys. Oh, boy. Where's my... if I flip to the main scene, everything's going to go crazy. Anyway, you can tweet me at Dungeon Bastard if you have ideas for how you would like to contribute to this. You can contact us through the chat. You can get a hold of Dom. He'll pass things along to me, etc. But if you have any input or ideas, we are all ears. I'd love to hear it. The show's just starting, so I do want to give it a chance, but I'm excited to get this thing going, and I'm really excited, as I said before, that you guys get to watch it. So I hope you will tune in tomorrow night. Let's take a look at the rest of the calendar, shall we? Oh, I actually uploaded the calendar. So this has been Disorganized Play. Tomorrow night is Ironkeep Chronicles. You can see what I have prepared, how it will play out. We will come with new characters. We will try the new chat rewards. It will be an amazing, exciting time. Then on Thursday at 2 o'clock, I come back here. I recap how it played out, what I thought, what played out well, what did not play out well, what worked, what didn't work, what surprised me with about how the characters responded, how they played perfectly into my hands. You know, you're not going to hear a lot of that. But that is Thursday at 2 o'clock. At 8 o'clock, it is a new season of our Star Wars. Ooh, boy, it's the Edge of the Empire game from Fantasy Flight Games. It's set in the Edge of the Empire era. Never Tell Me the Odds with DM, GM, Mr. David Crennan. So tune in for that. Friday night is our wildly successful Savage Savage Worlds. How do someone describe wildcards for me in a very succinct way, because my brain is fried and I'm not doing it. But Farquaad informs me that Gaurav is going to do Heroes of the Storm tonight around 9 Pacific, which is not on the schedule. Yes, Deadlands Reloaded, right? Weird West. Deadlands Reloaded. Thank you, BSB Care. Is our Friday night game of wildcards. Saturday, it is Phoenix Dawn Command at 12:30, and then Sunday you can catch up on the YouTubes or however you so see fit. So, as always, please tell your friends and neighbors back our Patreon if you are so inclined. Sub up if you are so inclined. There is a folder of materials, including this map that is available for you to download, including the Beastlings character sheets that is available for you to download if you are a Patreon backer. Go into the Patreon folder. You will find a folder for Ironkeep, marked Ironkeep. So go out and enjoy that. Other than that, I will be back tomorrow night at 8 o'clock on Saving Throw Show, where we will see our very first session of Dungeons & Dragons D&D 5. I wanted to say D&D next. Our D&D 5 game. We will see how all of this plays out. I hope you will join me. Until then, let's dungeon! Yeah, 6 for 6, you guys. It's a walk away. It's a hit of amazing, outstanding genius. Once again, my clicking skills are undeniable.